Welcome and thank you for your interest. Thanks also to the University of Montreal for enabling me to speak here. And finally, my special thanks to the Uncommon Senses team for the invitation and for their excellent organization of this event. My text explores the question, how does effectiveness arise? It presents a new conceptual model that lets us understand effectiveness and how it relates to atmospheres. The new atmospheric model is transcultural and transdisciplinary. It reveals the interplay of disparate and multimodal particulars by connecting theory and practice and by overcoming dichotomous perspectives. Why do we love Paris, Barcelona, Rome? In our city, why do we avoid certain areas and routes? Why do we want to be in one place but absolutely not in another? What is it that makes something pleasant or unbearable for us? And why do we so often share such a striking consensus? Individual features cannot account for this, as they are judged far too differently from subjective and cultural perspectives. I'll begin with a story. As a child, I loved spending time in my parents' shop, especially when the rain set in. Then the large covered entrance would fill with passers-by, some darting in at the first drops, others trudging in, already soaked. Some stood still, silent and tense, others laughed, relieved. And then, as if by some quiet spell, everything changed. Those stranded there, moments ago strangers, seemed suddenly woven into a single fabric of shared waiting. A fleeting sense of belonging hung in the air, until the rain ended and the spell, like the gathering, dissolved. Here we witness an atmosphere emerging out of nothing. But what exactly was happening? What is the connection between a weather event, the architecture, people, and their interactions? How do these different particulars come together into an atmospheric whole which has a specific effect? What do rain, shelter, people, and interactions have in common? They can all surround or envelop us, though in very different ways. We sense all of these as something specific around us, something that includes us within. Hermann Schmitz emphasizes the bodily spatial quality that gives rise to feelings of confinement or expansiveness. Gernot Böhme highlights the spatial character of atmospheres. This is the point I want to build on. Spatiality is mostly discussed in aesthetic disciplines. Architects, artists, musicians, designers, and directors understand spatiality as something tied to specific design elements and qualities, such as colors, forms, proportions, contrasts, density, material, and others. Social perspectives, such as sociology, psychology, or education, view spatiality, if they consider it at all, as something abstract, formless, immaterial. But in atmospheres, all kinds of spatiality interact. Because individual disciplines can only grasp specific aspects of spatiality, our understanding of atmospheres is often incomplete. This leads some to attribute good atmospheres to beauty, while others see harmonious interaction as decisive. But our difficulty in grasping the phenomenon of atmospheres does not lie with the phenomenon itself. It arises from the different and isolated modes of access. I choose an inverted perspective. Let's take a closer look at spatiality itself. What does discomfort or well-being feel like? They are experienced as bodily spatial feelings of constriction or expansiveness. A sense of security is accompanied by the feeling of being protectively surrounded. Freedom is accompanied by the sense that boundless space is available. Everything that envelops or surrounds us, whether aesthetic or social in nature, material or immaterial, abstract or concrete, subjective or objective, has an atmospheric dimension. A warm bath, a sunny spring day, tight or loosely flowing clothing, our home, our origin, a quarrel or a depression. All of these can surround or envelop us. We find ourselves caught up in them. They can constrict or protect us, support or expose us. From this, I would like to derive the following. Anything that can surround or envelop us holds atmospheric potency. I would like to illustrate this with a personal example. I love music. It has always moved me, whether techno, Sakamoto or Fernihau. Music transported me to another world. It enchanted me, carried me away, sent me into a trance. Recently, I lost my sense of hearing in one ear. I still listen to music, but it has changed dramatically. I hear the same tones, sounds, and rhythms, but now everything becomes densely stacked in an impenetrable way. It's an exhausting compression that no longer creates spatiality and no longer envelops me. The consequence is profound. I no longer bodily sense music. It hardly touches me anymore. Spatiality is key. It is the spatiality of something, not the perception of measurable properties, that enables it to be sensed. This is why distinguishing between perceiving and sensing is so crucial if we want to gain a better understanding of atmospheres. We can perceive red, we can perceive proportions, and we can perceive a car, but we cannot bodily sense red, proportions, or a car unless we are completely surrounded by them. Atmospheres of tension or cheerfulness, on the other hand, can be sensed without being traceable to specific perceptible details. Perception is well understood and has been extensively studied. Bodily sensing, however, has received almost no attention. Perception is directed toward particulars and facts. It aims to recognize and classify things. It is active and reflexive and often accompanied by judgment. What we sense, by contrast, befalls us. Sensing and bodily sensing is immediate. It opens up relationships, states of affairs, and conditions to us. Perceiving and bodily sensing are fundamentally different, yet they complement each other. Together, they give us access to the world. In atmospheres, however, bodily sensing plays the primary role. We can bodily sense atmospheres, but of course we can also perceive them. That depends on whether they surround us or not. If we are immersed in them, we bodily sense them. If we are not surrounded by them, we only perceive them. That is the case when we follow a live broadcast of a concert. If we were there in person, we could actually bodily sense the atmosphere. What we bodily sense as a spatial surrounding is inescapable. We are drawn into it, unable to master it. That is where the immense power of atmosphere lies. Another fundamental difference between perceiving and bodily sensing lies in the subjective limitation of perception. We can only ever perceive something as subjects with our own sensory apparatus and from our own standpoint. For that reason, we perceive most things differently from others. Atmospheres, by contrast, can be sensed together with others, and in fact, the same atmosphere can be sensed by all. While our perception is subjective and tends to separate us from others, de gustibus non est disputandum, shared sensing can connect us. I refer to our ability to experience and bodily sense atmospheres together with others as omnisubjectivity. The shared sensing of atmospheres occurs far more frequently in our everyday lives than we tend to think. After all, we are rarely entirely alone in the surroundings and situations we inhabit. The oppressive sorrow of a funeral, the exuberant joy of a carnival, or the dullness of an uninspired lecture, we bodily sense all of these together with everyone else present. And this is true regardless of each individual's attitude toward the event. Even if carnivals make someone uncomfortable, they still sense the exuberance. Even if we take great interest in the subject of a talk, an uninspired speaker can put us to sleep. The only way to protect ourselves from this is to physically remove ourselves from the situation or the surroundings, moving from one atmosphere to another. Atmospherically speaking, we are always embedded in surroundings and situations. I define surroundings as everything that can surround or envelop us in a concrete sense. This includes all aesthetically graspable facts. Situation refers to everything that can surround or envelop us in an abstract way. This includes psychological, social, and intellectual conditions. We typically distinguish between surroundings and situation. They are treated in different academic disciplines, but in atmospheres, the two are tightly interwoven. I would like to illustrate this with an example. In the late 1990s, a car manufacturer approached me for help with an internal communication problem. A communication problem is a problem of situation. Everything had been tried to improve the situation. Team building activities, one-on-one and group conversations, workshops, even reassessing the leadership culture. But none of this brought any improvement. When I went on site, however, it became clear to me that the problem was not one of the situation, but one of the surrounding. The workspaces of all 250 employees were scattered across a vast, labyrinthine building complex holding thousands of engineers. Many colleagues had never met in person and didn't know each other. There was a commonly experienced situation working for the same company, but no commonly experienced surroundings. There was no atmospheric interplay between surroundings and situation. A sense of togetherness couldn't emerge because they were, quite literally, not in the same boat. Working in that department didn't feel like anything specific. This made both responsibility and connectedness impossible. The solution was to create physically shared environments which allowed an atmosphere of belonging and mutual responsibility to take hold. Yet the question which forces are at work in atmospheres remains unanswered. What is it that creates an atmospheric effect? What role do individual elements play? We can see this more clearly if we examine those moments when an atmosphere suddenly tips. We all know such tipping points. The cheerful, carefree atmosphere of a spring day under a bright blue sky can be instantly destroyed by a traffic accident. Whatever can tip an atmosphere must be an atmospheric force. But are atmospheric forces the same as individual triggers? Can the diverse individual triggers even be meaningfully categorized? Does it make sense to classify them as aesthetic or social, material or immaterial, concrete or abstract, subjective or objective? How would that even work, given that spatiality is so crucial and can manifest in such a wide variety of ways? Based on these tipping points and considering their spatiality, I have identified the 5 atmospheric forces. They are place, relational beings, occurrences, sensory qualities, and culture. Every atmosphere is composed of these 5 forces. Each of the 5 forces has spatiality and can be sensed as constriction or expansiveness. Each force can cause an atmosphere to tip. Each of the 5 forces transcends dichotomies. Place and sensory qualities are more closely associated with surroundings, while relational beings and culture are more closely associated with situation. Occurrences are always an element of both. This illustrates very clearly the problem of graspability we face with atmospheres. On the left, what can be grasped from an aesthetic perspective, on the right, what can be grasped from an ethical social one. What falls through the cracks almost every time are the occurrences. I would now like to briefly present each of the 5 forces. Place. Where I am is always atmospherically relevant. If we are with someone at a party and leave the kitchen for another room, the conversation immediately changes. It intensifies, fades, or comes to a halt. A place need not be material or concrete. Where we are, geographically, spatially, emotionally, or socially, is always sensed spatially. This is reflected in expressions like "I've been backed into a corner" or "I hit rock bottom." Whether we are given room to move in a certain matter or setting or not is bodily sensed as either constriction or expansiveness. Relational beings. Who or what is present is always atmospherically relevant. When another person or even a dog enters a room, the atmosphere changes instantly. Not only living beings can be relational beings, but also anything that can become a counterparty, a companion, or a relational other. This includes governments, political parties, corporations, agencies, but also inanimate systems or devices such as a smartphone, machines, or technologies like AI. Regardless of their nature, relational beings have an immediate effect on an atmosphere. If my hands are tied by a supervisor, if my GPS sends me the wrong way, or if I'm surrounded by machines in a hospital, this leaves a bodily felt impression of spatial constriction. On the other hand, if I'm embedded in a broad network of colleagues, if I can make productive use of AI, or if I'm skilled in dealing with technology, I bodily sense expansiveness in the form of being supported, confident, or capable. Occurrences. What happens is always atmospherically relevant. A sudden change in the weather, an accident, a trip, a celebration, an illness, or a geopolitical incident, all of these can instantly shift the atmosphere. Occurrences are the most overlooked and underestimated force in atmospheres. That is hardly surprising, since no academic discipline is dedicated solely to them. Occurrences can be atmospherically accompanied by spatial feelings of constriction or expansiveness, as we all bodily experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sensory qualities. How something looks, feels, sounds, smells, or tastes is always atmospherically relevant. Unbearable noise or stench can instantly destroy the peaceful atmosphere of a balmy summer evening. When the lights come on at the end of a film in a cinema, the atmosphere changes in a flash. Color, smell, sound, light, temperature, material, form, and more belong to the atmospheric force of sensory qualities. Sensory qualities are perceivable, but once they surround us spatially, they are bodily sensed. They can evoke coziness and cheerfulness, but also feelings of constriction, cold, or lack of grounding, like fog. Why something is the way it is or is deemed to be is always atmospherically relevant. In an unfamiliar situation or surrounding, in a foreign country, a different social context, a new language, or a new workplace, there are rules, codes, and concepts that we may not know or have mastered. Conforming to or violating such rules, codes, and concepts can cause an atmosphere to tip in an instant. This is bodily sensed. It produces spatial feelings of being enveloped by safety, intimacy, certainty, or conversely, by insecurity, disorientation, and forlornness. Every culture, be it food culture, corporate culture, or clan culture, has this effect. I would like to conclude with the perspective that the new atmospheric model offers for shaping our everyday world. We can design atmospheres if we understand the interplay of the five forces and their spatiality. The more balanced the relationship between constriction and expansiveness is in the interaction of these five forces, the more pleasant an atmosphere will be. Whether we are building a hospital, developing an urban district, or planning a mobility transition, planning has been subject and discipline driven, coordinating aesthetic, social, technical, economic, and political factors with expert input. Yet outcomes often diverge from expectations. Renderings and concepts fall short of lived reality. In urban spaces especially, we find ourselves surrounded by unintended atmospheres. Even technically or aesthetically successful projects can feel atmospherically barren, dreary amid beauty, disoriented amid innovation. The new atmospheric model offers us a meta-level perspective from which it becomes possible to shape the complex interplay of architecture, mobility, spatial and urban planning, sociology, ecology, economy, psychology, technology, and design in terms of their overall effect. With its five atmospheric forces, it also provides us with concrete levers and starting points for improvement. For the first time, the new atmospheric model opens up a path to pursuing goals that lie beyond what is concretely measurable. It enables us to face major challenges with greater confidence and to shape a more atmospherically livable future. I'd like to thank you for your attention.